I had marked her section of the Halloway Tract non-merchantable for 6 years running before I ever spoke to her. That was the job. I walked timber for the county, cruised board feet on land the state was fixing to rezone, and every fall I climbed past the Fen Ridge lookout to check the boundary stakes. The old fire tower there had a caretaker nobody in town could name. Just the Ridge Woman, a shape at the window when the light hit right. My first year I found her spring-fed grove on the cruise map, saw good clean timber standing in it, and wrote it down as rot core and beetle kill instead. Nobody checked my numbers. Nobody ever does, out that far. I did the same thing every October after, quietly, without being asked, and I never once said why. She caught me at it in year 4, came down off the tower steps while I was resetting a corner stake and said, "Flat, you've been lying about my trees." "They're not worth cruising," I said. "They're worth plenty. You just keep writing them worthless." She had a way of holding still that made you feel like the moving thing in the room, even out under open sky. Dark hair cropped short and uneven, like she'd cut it herself with a knife more than once. Eyes an odd deep amber that didn't quite catch light the way eyes are supposed to. I'd noticed that the first year too. I'd decided it wasn't my business. "Guess I do," I said, and went back to my stake, and that was the whole conversation. After that, she'd nod when she saw me. Some years she'd have coffee going on the wood stove and leave the door propped. Not an invitation exactly, just a door that wasn't shut. I fixed her solar array every autumn before the first hard freeze. The charge controller was a cheap model that failed every third winter, and I kept spares in my truck and never once mentioned the cost. She never asked where they came from. I never told her. Her name, when she finally gave it, was Wren. I didn't ask what it was before that. I want to say I noticed something more than an old woman keeping a tower, some early sign I was too slow to name. I didn't. I noticed a person living alone on hard ground who kept her woodpile squared away better than most men I knew, who never once asked me for anything beyond leaving her be, and who fixed the tower's shutters herself every spring rather than wait on the county to send a crew that never came. That was reason enough for a man to keep quiet about a grove of good timber. I didn't need a crown behind it. I've thought since that maybe that's the only reason the rest of it ever worked. I wasn't measuring her against anything. I was just measuring what was in front of me, same as I would any stand of trees worth leaving standing. This past October, the crew that came through wasn't a crew I recognized, and they weren't cruising timber. 4 of them, government tags on their trucks that didn't match any agency I could place, walking the tract in a grid too even for men looking for game. They carried rifles slung but never raised, and handheld units they'd hold up to the wind like they were reading it. Their lead, a big gray-eyed man named Halvard, found me at the boundary line and asked, casual as weather, whether I'd seen anything unusual near the ridge. Not a bear. Not a poacher. Unusual. "Just an old woman keeping the tower," I said. "How old?" Halvard said, and something in the flatness of it told me he already knew the answer was wrong. He thanked me, the way a man thanks you when he already suspects you've lied, polite and unhurried, and went back to walking his grid. I watched his crew work the track the rest of that afternoon from a rise above the creek, the 4 of them fanning out and closing in again with a patience no hunting party I'd ever seen could manage. And I understood before I had words for it, that whatever they were looking for, they meant to find it before dark. I found her that evening before he could. She was standing at the tower rail with her jaw set the way it got before storms, watching their lights move through the trees below like she was counting them. "They're not hunters," I said. "No," she said. "They're a retrieval writ. 4 years since the last one found this range." She said it the way you'd report weather, and her hands were shaking anyway. I should have moved on before now. "Tell me what they want." She was quiet long enough that I thought she wouldn't. Then, "My name isn't Wren, it's Sarai Vantha Cora. I held the Reach seat for 11 years, before my regents decided a hunted queen writes better law than a living one. I have been 6 years finding places men don't look twice at." She watched my face for the thing she expected, fear, or the particular greed some men get around a crown, even a fallen one. I didn't have either to give her. "6 years and you kept a garden," I said. 6 years and you never once let that stove go cold when I came up half frozen. That isn't an answer to a writ, Nash. It's the only one I've got." She almost laughed, and it broke something loose in her face instead. The first crack I'd seen in 6 years of watching her hold still. "You marked my trees worthless for 6 years, so no one would ever have cause to walk this grove and look up," she said. "You knew." I knew there was something here worth leaving alone. Didn't need the rest of it to act on that. Halvard's grid closed on the tower a little after full dark. I stood on the bottom step with nothing in my hands but a flashlight, and told him the Ridge Woman was long gone north, and watched him not believe a single word of it. He had the writ authority to search regardless. A reach retrieval order doesn't ask a human's permission, and he'd have found her in the loft inside of 10 minutes if she hadn't come down the stairs herself first, in the plain wool coat she always wore, looking like exactly what she'd built herself to look like, a tired woman who kept a fire tower. Then she stopped holding still. She named herself to him in a language I didn't know and one word I did, Cora, and something about the bearing she took on while she said it, spine straight, chin level, made 4 armed men go quiet in a way 4 rifles hadn't managed. She told him her regent's writ ran on a claim that she'd forfeited the seat by abandonment, and she meant, standing on her own ground in front of a witness, to contest that claim right now, tonight, under old right of return, because a monarch found and kept safe by one loyal hand for 6 full years hadn't abandoned anything. She'd been sheltered. There was a difference in reach law, and she knew it cold. Halvard looked at me like I was supposed to explain myself. I didn't have anything to explain. I'd fixed her charge controller every October. I'd written her trees worthless so nobody would come looking. None of that had ever felt like keeping a queen. It had only ever felt like the plain thing to do for somebody nobody else was doing right by. He's the witness, she said. Not to me. 6 years, unbroken. That is the whole of my defense, and it is more than the regents can produce against it. Halvard's unit chirped something I couldn't read. Whatever the writ required, a contest, a witness, a clean unbroken record of care freely given, with nothing asked in return. She'd just put it plainly on the table, in front of the men sent to end the question by force. He stood there working his jaw for a long moment, then folded the writ down into his coat like a man folding a losing hand, and told his crew to walk it back to the trucks. She didn't move until the last set of lights had cleared the tree line. Then she came down the last 2 steps and stood in front of me in the dark, and her hands weren't shaking anymore. 6 years I let you believe I was only ever a woman keeping a tower, she said. You were, I said. That part wasn't a lie. I have a reach to answer for now. A challenge to bring, if I choose to bring it. She looked back once at the dark tree line where the truck's lights had gone. I don't know that I choose it. Then don't. You'd have me stay a tired woman on a ridge. I'd have you stay whatever you want to be. I just intend to keep fixing that charge controller either way. She looked at me a long moment, the amber in her eyes catching what little light the stars gave the ridge, and for the first time in 6 years I watched her let herself be looked at instead of merely seen. Then I'll stay a while longer, she said, and you can go on marking my trees worthless every October if it still needs doing. It won't now. Nobody's looking twice at this ridge anymore. No, she said, but you still will. That's the part I never had a name for, until tonight. I didn't have one for it either. I just kept climbing that ridge every fall after, same as always, and she kept the door propped whether or not she called it an invitation.